It's you in English, Anna Nichenko. Hello, and today our guest is Anna Brodsky-Krotkina, Washington and Lee University professor. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you that you today joined. And my first question is about the visit of U.S. President. There are lots of discussions now whether Joe Biden to Ukraine can visit, and it's only question of the time. This said Adam Schiff, chairman of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. What do you think? Is this visit possible to Ukraine, and what can you say now about U.S. support of Ukraine?
Well, I think the support is growing. And it's growing, it's not growing incrementally, it's growing like a wave. And we have a number of polls, public opinion polls that support this. And we can see, first of all, let me tell you, first of all, about the attitude towards Russia, because it's a key component here. Before the war, less than half of the population thought that Russia really was an enemy or presented any danger. Once the war started, that number began to grow. And as soon as the war started, about 70% of American respondents saw Russia as the enemy. Now, 85% of Americans, regardless of their party orientation, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, think that Putin is a war criminal, Russia is committing atrocities, and its leadership has to be responsible. That's a huge shift in the attitudes. Let me also tell you how people respond to the idea of American military support. And those two ideas are linked, the attitude towards Russia and the attitude towards the military support. Those are absolutely linked concepts. So 66% of Americans think that Russia is capable of a nuclear blast. That's also an important factor. And 70% of Americans think that America should supply Ukraine with aviation. That is very, very important because the American government has been very hesitant to supply aviation to Ukrainians. Yet the public opinion is there, really rooting for Ukraine and is willing to put America at a certain risk and supply aviation. Moreover, 60% of Americans support the idea of closing the sky, making the sky over Ukraine a no-fly zone. Again, you can see the public opinion runs ahead of the government. America is a democracy, and therefore the government has to take into consideration the public opinion. It is absolutely crucial. If Biden wants to win as a president, he needs to follow the public opinion. Let's also look at Biden's, and that will kind of give you a good idea about whether America is going to do everything it can to help Ukraine win. Biden's ratings are not anything to be proud of. It's about 40% approval rate. So now you can see this interesting discrepancy. Americans say, help Ukraine as much as possible. Do everything you can, but you're not doing enough ultimately. We are not giving you an A mark. You are a C student. At best, you're almost failing. What would Biden need to do to remedy the situation, to answer the demand of his constituency, to answer the demands actually of American people, and also to help his own ratings? He has to help Ukraine win. If Biden loses, if Ukraine loses, Biden loses. If Ukraine loses, Democratic Party loses. And let me say another thing, that the record of the Democratic Party is not stellar when it comes to Ukraine. And now the public opinion is hugely supportive of Ukraine. We remember that it was the Democratic Party in charge, Obama and Biden, who ultimately turned away from Ukraine when Russia annexed the Crimea. They ultimately shrugged their collective shoulders. They basically said it's not exactly our business. So if we think about that situation, also Remember that right now, in the very recent, Americans have oftentimes short memory, but in very recent past, Biden messed up the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. You have this combination of negative factors where the president of the United States has to show that he basically has the cojones. He can beat back the enemy, support Ukraine, and help his own party in the process.
Have more questions. So we know that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky met U.S. Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, and during her visit to Ukraine, to Kyiv, we know that there was communication. Let's listen and continue.
I am grateful to you for this signal of strong support from the United States, the people and Congress, bicameral and bipartisan support. I highly appreciate this signal as the President, our team and the people of Ukraine. This shows that the United States today is a leader in strong support for Ukraine during the war against the aggression of the Russian Federation. And I want to thank you for that, for supporting Ukraine to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
We believe that we are visiting you to say thank you for your fight for freedom, that we are on a frontier of freedom, and that your fight is a fight for everyone. And so our commitment is to be there for you until the fight is done.
And we know that this visit of Nancy Pelosi was really something important for Ukraine, important for USA. What do you think? What new steps from US will be according to this support to Ukraine?
Well, we can see that ultimately Pelosi says the same thing that reflects the public opinion and ultimately reflects the current policy of the White House. She says, we will not stand to bullying. She calls Putin a bully, and that certainly is a very, very bad term in the American cultural context. A bully is someone who is big, strong, and is ready to assault a weak one. This happens that calling him a bully might seem like, not such a strong language, but in the context of American culture, it's very strong because there has been years of campaign against bullying. Bullies are really frowned on. So she calls Putin a bully. And she says, we're not going to stand to bullying. Bullies understand only the language of strength. We're here to win, and we are going to stick with the process. And that is very telling. And okay, these are words, this is language, but the language is also supported by what the administration is doing right now. Biden proposed $33 billion to support Ukraine right now. Now the Congress overwhelmingly approved of Lend-Lease. So there are other legislations that have been passed. It's kind of a suggestive legislation that basically has a power of a suggestion, and one of it is. It's the bill encouraging the government to confiscate the frozen assets and pass them to Ukraine for the purposes of offsetting the damages and reconstructing Ukrainian economy after the war is over. So you can see that on every front, America is moving towards helping Ukraine. And just why is it happening so massively? Why is everyone so much on board? And here I have to say one important thing is because the information is readily available. American journalists are doing a pretty amazing job of it. No matter what channel you turn on American TV, you're going to see horrific images of Bucha, horrific images of Mariupol. There isn't one single American who does not know what's happening in Ukraine. It's emotionally affecting everyone. In fact, it creates almost an umbrella, a cloud of anxiety over the entire nation, and for good reason, because Americans' democracy is also frequently under assault. And the terror, we can see that what terrible things can happen when you have an authoritarian dictatorship.
Really good work. Absolutely agree with you that it was really good work of journalists. Usually we listen to Volodymyr Zelensky on different American TV channels and also in newspapers. There are lots of articles about Ukraine. And we also know that Andriy Yermak, head of Zelensky office, gave an interview to CNN.
It's our goal in this work, and our military forces and our brave army, of course, back all our territory which is temporarily occupied. You are right that now the biggest battles concentrated in the southeast of Ukraine and especially in Donbass. And of course, all the world now know the name of our city Mariupol, in which it's still very difficult, I can say, catastrophic situation. It's practically destroyed for more than 90%. But of course, we are planned and we want, and I'm sure we are back all our territories.
And now my question is connected with Mr. Biden and his attitude, his relations with Putin. What do you think? How had these relations changed? Biden, Putin?
Well, I think the answer is, pretty much obvious. I'd like to preface it that Americans generally are not into the idea of having an enemy. This, the love of the concept of the enemy, that's the mark of an authoritarian regime. Americans tend to be interested in their own well-being. So for Americans really to have a clear sense that Russia is an enemy, that's something new. It's a novelty. Well, of course, in Russia, the anti-American, anti-Western propaganda is that what people eat for breakfast, basically. And it has very long roots. The roots are in the Soviet Union, and Putin's Russia, Putin's government is simply capitalizing on something that has been built into the ideological system for decades. Now, Biden's attitude towards Russia, of course, is hardening, just like it's hardening across the country. Although, to be fair, he right away said Putin is a killer. Biden is not a master of diplomacy, and it's a good thing. Usually the diplomats complain massively that it's a gaffe. How could he have said something like that? But in a way, in the situation of the war, and the situation when things are black and white, you have an aggressor against unprovoked aggression against a small country. There is no reason to hide behind smooth words. So it was Biden who said Putin is the killer. Then Biden said Putin should not be in power. We all agree with that. Why not say that aloud? Truth is extremely powerful, and Biden's statements are very powerful. How will this relationship develop further? That is pretty obvious. There will be more sanctions. Mm-hmm. Currently, there is a group working at Stanford. It's a large group of political scientists and economists that actually are working on exactly on this concept, what kind of sanctions would be particularly useful. And basically, it boils down to, and what kind of effects it would have on the Russian economy. But basically, it boils down to, of course, the oil and gas embargo. And that is hopefully a very achievable goal. There will be, and of course, America already is not buying oil from Russia. So that's banned.
I have one more. Yes, Anna, just one more question. It's connected with NATO summit. We're waiting for this NATO summit this summer. What do you think? What can Ukraine hope for?
I think with NATO, Ukraine should hope for a changing of NATO's position. What NATO has done in 2008 was really a very bad idea. You just have to look at the moment at the history of it. when Bush proposed, the American President Bush proposed that Ukraine and Georgia would be a part of NATO. By the way, his advisors, and he at the time had a very clever advisor, Fiona Hill, who cautioned him against this kind of a thing, but this kind of a proposal, thinking that it would absolutely not succeed. But Bush went ahead and made that proposal. Grant you, politically, it was a pointless proposal, but had NATO had the guts to accept Ukraine and Georgia, this horrible war wouldn't have happened. What NATO did at the time was absolutely the worst of both worlds. They did not accept Ukraine. At the same time, they said, but we will or might accept you in the future. So they were creating a pretext for Putin to have this NATO narrative that NATO is moving towards its borders, at the same time not protecting Ukraine. So it was exactly sitting in between, as the Russians would say in this case, sitting in between the two chairs. It does not work. And hopefully NATO would start reconsidering its ultimately very harmful position.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for your explanations. I'll remind to our viewers it was Anna Brodsky-Krotkina, Washington and Lee University professor. It was UATV in English. Anna Nichenko. See you.